Hello, hello. Welcome to Courage Becomes Her, where we connect and share real life stories. I'll talk with women whom I love and I'm inspired by, women who are experiencing life just like you and me. I'm excited for us to gather together and cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in life and work.
I do kind of love roots, but early on I started, studying abroad, traveling abroad, and I recognized that my life feels richer when I have people around me that are different than me, when I get to experience different cultures. That was fun for me. If we're also always kind of looking really forward, if you were just to think about life planning, does it move us even closer toward our goals of what's important to us as a family? We talk about that too, not just the move itself, but the longer term goals of what we want to accomplish in our lifetime together.
That was Mary Oftenberg. I am so excited for you to meet my friend Mary in today's conversation. We are talking about taking a leap of faith by her moving her entire family across the country, pretty much as far as you can get from one place in America to another. So Mary and I have known one another since 2015, and I am just continually inspired by her, both from her family life as well as her professional life. She is a second-degree black belt in martial arts, and as you'll hear in this conversation, has found a new joy in roller disco. And on weekend mornings, one of her favorite things to do is to curl up with one of the dogs on her lap while reading a good book and enjoying a cup of coffee. She has been with the Greater Daimler Entity Corporation for 19 years and is currently an executive leader with them, serving as their general manager of product strategy and market development for the Daimler Trucks organization. And like I said, in this conversation, we're talking about this big leap of faith of moving across the country. She's had the opportunity to do so before, and we talk about how she processed through that this was the right time, how she and her husband worked through the possibilities and talked about how it is that this was the right time for them. Mary talks about getting comfortable with change and the process that is for her. And you'll hear her talk about several different parts of that process that are just so cool and important and really grounding, and honestly uses that strategic side of her professional life and her personal life as well, and identifying what is important to her, talking through the concerns, talking openly and honestly about the concerns, and then being able to just identify and recognize what her threshold for stress is, her capacity for change, and honestly not being afraid of adventure and change, which is something that a lot of us wrestle with. And I talk a little bit about what it means to remind yourself that nothing is permanent, and that not getting yourself to a place where you're feeling stuck or that you end up second guessing yourself or regretting your decision, and ultimately being intentional about discovering and exploring the newness of your new adventure together as a family. So join in for this really just fun, lovely, insightful, informative conversation with my friend Mary. Mary, thank you so much for joining me for this conversation today and joining the Courage Becomes Her podcast crew.
Yeah, thanks for having me, Laurel. I'm really excited to be here today.
I am as well. I'm excited to have you here. So thank you. So we'll get to our topic of taking a leap of faith here in just a minute, but let's get to know you. So we're going to talk quite a bit about it in this conversation, but where is home?
Yeah, home is Portland, Oregon.
And obviously we'll talk about that, but that's relatively new. And where did you grow up? Maybe give a little bit more context on that part.
Yeah, absolutely. I grew up in the Midwest in a suburb outside of Chicago. So I would say spent majority of my life there. Also had the pleasure of living downtown Chicago as well, which was really a highlight for me.
That would be really fun. Yeah, I bet that would be a lot of fun. All right. I know you love books just like I do. So, what's a book that has transformed your life?
That's like the hardest question you could ask me. I think I read every genre possible. And, the irony is, I love to tell people I don't really read business books. And when you ask the question, the first book that came to mind, I'm actually going to tell you three books that I really just always stick in my mind. And none
Yeah.
of them are really in the novel genre, which is kind of where I usually stick. I love historical fiction, especially. But I love Long Walk to Freedom.
Yeah.
Nelson Mandela, super inspiring to me in terms of who he is as a person and a leader. That's one. Two, a book that you gave me, which is Culture Code. And
Mm.
the idea of, I think it's the first time where I felt like things that were important to me in culture and as a leader were really shared, which is about building safety and sharing vulnerability and establishing purpose. And it's something I've carried with me. But finally, I think the one that's really interesting is Quiet, the Power of Introverts.
Yes.
And I'm borderline introvert, extrovert. I'm a little bit in the middle. But when my son was really, really young, someone recommended that I read this book to understand him and his personality a little bit.
Mm.
And it really helped me think about relationships with people and setting up space for different personalities, especially in the introverted space. And that's helped me in my personal life, as well as I would say in my business career.
Yeah. Yeah. So good. Yeah. All three of those are excellent. And actually, I remember us when I very first met you in 2015 you talked about the Long Walk to Freedom and how transformational that book had been for you. So thanks for sharing about it again. How about what has made you laugh or filled your cup in the last day or so?
Well, that's so easy. It's being on this podcast with you.
No, your life is far more exciting than that. Although
Oh my
I'm
gosh.
so glad to have you, but every day it seems like there's something just super energizing about your life, which I
Oh my
love.
God. So, okay. So then I will split it into two other categories, but I am serious. It's so fun to be here with you.
Thank you.
Because I have two children, it's really hard for me to pick one. So one, my son turns 13. So I'm going to have a teenager. And the moments of joy in this week of us talking about him becoming a
Mm.
teenager and what that means and our plans for the weekend. He wants to go to the Tillamook factory and do an ice cream and cheese
Oh,
tour,
fun.
eat as many crab legs as possible. Just like having this moment of having a teenager and being excited as a family to celebrate has just been huge joy for me. That's one.
I love it.
Two, Clara, who's in fifth grade, is just received a note from their teacher as it's been report card time. And it was less about the grades and more about how the teacher felt like Clara was meant to be in their class this year because of what they bring to the other students with regards to friendship and inclusion and belonging and the presence they have in the classroom and what a difference maker they are. And I think I started to cry. It was a really beautiful note from a teacher and something that I see in Clara, and really fun to know that somebody else sees it as well.
So beautiful. I love that. All right, how about current obsession in any genre? Can be food or podcast or app or anything.
Oh my gosh, this one's so easy. Current obsession. As you know, it used to be martial arts,
Yes.
a second degree black belt, but I have hung up my nunchucks for a pair of roller skates. And on Thursday night, we do the Secret Roller Disco in Portland with my family. And so the night before, they have a brand new pop-up location and they bring a DJ, and everybody usually dresses fun and there's great music, and you just roller skate for 2 hours. And it's amazing.
That is so amazing. So much fun. I don't remember. I think it was maybe back in 2019 on the Building Champions podcast, Daniel and I kind of did a conversation about the Portland roller derby and roller. It wasn't the disco arm. It was the actual like competitive derby part. And that is such a scene in Portland. It is so cool.
Yes,
So
and
much
I'm
fun.
definitely not in the roller derby category, but I have quite a few roller disco dance moves that are on my goal list for
I
calendar
love it.
23, Laurel.
This is super fun. Okay, so while we're on the topic of DJ, what was your first concert?
My first concert was Violent Femmes on
Oh,
campus. Yeah, on campus when I was in college, and it was in a really small venue, and I loved it. But
fun.
most notably is I got to bring Clara to Clara's first concert here in Portland, 21 Pilots. And it was just
Fun.
magical to see that through my child's eyes for the first time. And I would say I haven't gone to concerts in a really long time. And now I'm like lit up and excited. And I got us tickets to Pink because now I'm ready,
Oh,
ready for
so
more.
neat. Oh, that's great. I love that. All right, last one. What is the best movie or show that you have watched in the last year or so?
That is a good question. I really enjoyed Wednesday.
Oh, I haven't seen that yet. But
Yeah,
yeah, okay. Yeah.
longtime Adams Family fan
Yeah.
anyways. And again, it's been something fun to watch with the family, and really enjoyed Wednesday.
Okay. Super fun. Good. And I usually ask about Enneagram and love language, but you've got some homework to do to learn both of those for yourself. So
Yes, I do.
it's so good. Well, thank you. Thanks for letting us get to know you. So I asked you to join for this conversation. We're in this series of taking a leap of faith, and relatively recently, you took the leap of faith with your husband to move your family across the U.S., like literally pretty much almost as far from one space to another as you can get, of going from the greater Charlotte area now to the Portland metro area in Oregon. So, wow, first off. So many questions that we'll talk through. But first, maybe just dive into, like, you've made multiple moves before, but it's been a while since you've done them. So, what was kind of the decision-making process to decide, okay, we're going to make this gigantic move?
Yeah, to your reference point, I have moved before. I grew up mostly in the Chicago area, but out of school, I lived in Wisconsin and I moved there. None of my friends were moving there. They all went back to Chicago. So got to kind of start really fresh at a young age in a new
Mm.
city. Then back to Chicago. Jason and I then, before kids, moved to Greensboro. With kids, we moved to Charlotte. We did another move inside of Charlotte, and then ultimately Portland. I would say the conversation doesn't start with Portland. When Jason and I were dating, we had a conversation, and we've been married, Laurel, just about 19 years. So
Yeah.
when we were dating, I can remember the conversation. I do kind of love roots, but early on, I started, studying abroad, traveling abroad, and I
Mm.
recognized that my life feels richer when I have people around me that are different than me, when I get to experience different cultures. That was fun for me. But I really grew up around family and consistency and, living in the Midwest most of my life, and had that anchoring. Well, fast forward to when I met Jason, and I remember having this conversation that I remember it because it was something that I really thought, man, I better figure this out before I say yes. And his was like, hey, I get antsy And I like to experience new things. And I don't know that I could settle in one place my whole life. And I remembered thinking, gosh, I think when I have kids, my goal would be to be in the same place with the same people in the same neighborhood, just like I had. And if I were to create my perfect life, I have all my best friends living in my cul-de-sac with me. We
Mm.
still talk about that comment.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I remembered thinking like, gosh, I better figure this out because those two visions of our future are very different. But I think I deep down kind of knew this seeking out of different experiences and culture actually was a part of my true
Mm.
heart, which is probably why Jason and I were a good match. Like
Yeah.
we were able to kind of come together in this space. So in the end, it ended up being my career that moved us along the way. And then he had that initial core passion of wanting to move and experience different places and cultures. So that match
Mm.
actually worked really, really well. So by the time the Portland move came, and we could deeper dive that actual move itself if you want to, we've always had this open door of, hey, there might be a time where it doesn't make sense, but we'll always keep a crack to know that we may always move in the future if it's the right time, the right
Mm.
place. And if we're also always kind of looking really forward, like what, again, if you were just to think about life planning, does it move us even closer toward our goals of what's important to us as a
Mm.
family? We talk about that too, not just the move itself, but the longer term goals of what we want to accomplish in our lifetime together. And Portland fit that really well.
Mm. That's so good. Yeah. I mean, there's just some very specific intentions there that you looked at of, I love how you just said like the goals of the family, of seeking culture, looking for, diversity of people. Like those components are so good. And I think oftentimes when we're considering a move, like we maybe don't start with those. We don't start with looking at the end result. We think of more of like the emotional context, if you will. But I guess maybe based on what you said, like you guys dealt with the emotional stuff maybe way earlier on. Is that kind of how you would describe it a little bit?
Yeah, it could be. I think we get the emotional stuff out of the way before the move decision is given to us. I don't know if that
Uh-huh.
makes sense, right? But like we were almost seeding this move well before it came. And like I said, we were in Charlotte for quite a while and did say no to some move opportunities. It wasn't the right time. But even with our kids, I think a lot of times we want to shelter our kids from these topics because we think,
Hmm.
they're young, they won't understand.
Yeah.
But we would say things like, hey, as a family, we might move someday. And so
Yeah.
we would talk about what does that look like? What did mom and dad enjoy about their different moves? What was life like in Chicago? What was life like in Greensboro? So by the time we then tell our kids, hey, we're really interested in moving, they already have a concept of what that means and what
Mm.
success looked like for Jason and I as a family. And even, once they came in and how we made it work. So we we really built positive emotions around the idea of moving. And so for us, by the time we say yes, like we're pretty jazzed and excited about it. So you're right.
Yeah.
The scary stuff we've already processed usually before a decision point comes into place. And with that, I feel fortunate that we always have this open door of moving.
Yeah. That's so good. I think just the idea of like that we're keeping it a topic kind of all along. Like it's just it so that it's not a surprise. It's just like, okay, this could happen. It maybe won't happen. It maybe will happen. Like I that seems like that would be helpful for a lot of people, that it's not like there's this abrupt decision or abrupt change or something, that it's kind of been planted along the way. A
Yes.
drip campaign for family.
Oh my gosh. It's so true. Life is a drip campaign if you get it right. I like that.
So
Uh,
true.
yeah, and we really focus then on what are the things again that may make us excited and we're looking forward to. So in the Portland move, one, Jason's from the West Coast. He actually grew up in California. He had not been living back in the West Coast for almost 30 years.
Wow.
So we have
Yeah.
this great opportunity where now we're closer to some of his family again, right? So that's exciting and fun. Two, I told you we had lived in Chicago. After we moved out of Chicago, we lived in the suburb life.
Hmm.
Portland, we're not right in the city, but it's probably 5 minutes. We're 5 minutes from the city. Oh my gosh, the city just, for us, fills our cup. And
Hmm.
we realized like that for us is a fun move. And now getting to experience city life with our kids and what that can bring, like that was really fun. We told the kids, hey,
Hmm.
we're going to be living closer to Hawaii. So we could probably vacation in Hawaii. So you also take like those little
That's
small
right.
things, right? And Alaska. And so in the first year we said, you know what, spring break, maybe we should go to Hawaii, and Alaska maybe is a future one, but also find those like moments and excuses,
Yeah.
create memorable moments that maybe you wouldn't have had otherwise. So we do all of those things. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh, that's so good. So I think one part that we maybe haven't talked about is like this opportunity to go to Oregon has maybe been available to you for a while, and you had either actively said no to the opportunity or had resisted it. I don't, those are my words, not yours necessarily. So kind of talk about like why now, why, you said yes this time when you'd had the opportunity to, say yes previously, but didn't.
Yeah, I think it's a really good question. And I think part of it is, with every move, we were in a different space. And then once we get to that place, again, one was just me and Jason. That lifestyle looks very different than the next one, which was we have a baby, which is different than the one where we have toddlers, which is different than grade school. And, we haven't lived next to family for a very long time, which means
Mm.
for us, when we're getting into a new community, we're having to figure out who our village and tribe is. And when kids are young, that's more complicated. That's more challenging. You're invested in those kids. It feels like almost every minute of the day. I called it the
Mm.
soundtrack of my life, and I loved every minute of it. I think that was a big part of the resistance was, again, call it fear, call it all of those real emotions. Like, can I really start over figuring out who my babysitters are, who the
Mm.
pediatrician is, who their friends are, all of those things. And so at the time, I think Charlotte was fairly new. We were still enjoying, we were still exploring all those things that I talked about that
Yeah.
excites us. We hadn't really checked all the boxes. So between that, and I really did have an ability to say no and find some other things that worked for me for my career, as well as having a network in place that
Yeah.
worked really well for that place in our life. That made sense, and those things all matter.
Yeah. That's so good. Totally makes sense for sure. What is so interesting though, and you've heard this just like I have, that there are people that view it the exact opposite way, that it's like easier to move when their kids are young and feel like it's harder when they're older because the kids like have put down roots and that sort of thing. So I love that it just shows like every family is different, and the things that looked maybe more challenging to you were the younger years and the things associated with the younger years. So I think that's so fascinating and so important that each and every mom, marital relationship, spouse, or, whatever it is, like look at that their own individual situation for what it is rather than like, this big blanket decision.
I
So,
think you're, I mean, I think you're right. Absolutely. And I'm a story gatherer, right? So I've heard a lot of stories of people moving with their kids all different ages.
yeah.
And there are challenges with each story at every age, and there are benefits. And so maybe I just pick and choose the ones that work for me. I would say there's a self-help book out there for anything you want to do. So you just
That's
decide
right.
it and then find the book that fits for what you
That's
want to
right.
accomplish.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you're absolutely right. And then in that mix, right, is a child's personality. I actually, one of our hardest moves was when my kids were like 9 months and 2.5 years old.
Mm.
And my 2.5-year-old didn't have language for the move. And that was a really, I mean, could we get through it? Of course we could, but that was really a stressful
Wow.
move for us and for my children.
Hmm.
You talked about the Portland move. The other thing, which this may be a blip in time and no one else could, recreate this, but we moved on the tail end or kind of middle tail end of COVID. That
Mm-hmm.
actually for us created a very easy time to move.
Hmm. Yeah. Which that talk a little bit about that because I think for a lot of people, myself included, moving during the pandemic, during COVID, was actually more challenging. So, talk about why for you it was actually a good time.
Yeah, no, I think it's a good point, right? Because you can move, and then how do you establish relationships when
Yeah.
everybody locked down? For us, and we moved end of 2021. So again, starting to tail off. I would say Portland was still a little bit more shut down than the Carolinas were. My kids were still in a virtual school in
Mm-hmm.
2021 in Fort Mill, but in COVID for us, we've always been a pretty strong family unit, and
Yeah.
time spent together, quality time spent together, and purposeful time spent together is something that we all highly value and create a lot of space for.
Mm.
That really became even deeper during COVID, probably in a time where, again, kids would be running off and doing activities, and we would be all over the place as a family. We had just spent a year and a half together and really enjoyed each other's time overall. And so we had this feeling of, well, of course we can move. Like
Mm.
it's going to be us. We're going to be together. And now we just get to go to a new place and now create the new memories in that new place. But man, when we're together, we're unstoppable. We can do anything, and those types of conversations were happening. And then because the children had just had a year and a half of a lot of interacting with their friends in a very different way, much of it digital, they then were really able to keep those relationships really, really strong in a
That's
time that
so
that
cool.
probably wouldn't normally happen for someone that age. And so they didn't have this immediate feeling of, wow, I'm going to lose all of my best friends in my relationships. They were able to kind of integrate into Portland friendships in their own speed, of which Clara integrated into Portland ships faster, which really
Mm.
fits her personality. And Elliot was a little bit slower, and he still has really core group of friends in the Carolinas that he connects with quite often.
Mm.
So there were a lot of opportunities that came out of COVID that I think made this fifth grade, sixth grade timing work really well for us.
That's so good. Yeah, I love being able to hear that. And it makes so much sense, especially with at least having one that is more introverted. And yeah, I know they both are a little bit, but definitely Elliot being more so. Like I can see that being just easing into things quite a bit more. So, yeah. What else would you say, kind of from the preparation standpoint? Like you've talked about several, but are there any other elements, either from emotional preparation or familial or relational preparation, that you guys really were, thoughtful or intentional about, purposeful about?
That's a really good question. I think we talked a lot about it. I would say we were very intentional about how we made time for each other once we moved to Portland and how we explored the city and the area together and started to make it feel like home really quickly. I feel really fortunate, Laurel. We love it here. And we all love it here. And so one, I think the preparations and the conversations leading up to it, when we stepped, onto the ground of Portland, we all kind of felt like it was home already. And so it was like we
Wow.
came with the right attitude and the right spirit. I would say, I think this is the key thing that I tell a lot of people when you're deciding to move or not move. You can never know what the other path would have looked like,
Yep.
right? And you can never predict what's going to happen in terms of what's going to be great and what's going to be challenging. So once we make those really big decisions, we'll talk about them. We'll talk, here's the pros, here's the cons, very openly. Then we start leaning into the decision, we pick it, and then it's all in, and we say this was the right decision for us. Like there's no looking
Mm,
back on that. There's no, we look each other in the eye and we say, we're not going to go, man, should we have made a different decision?
mm.
We made this one. And it becomes that kind of self-fulfilling prophecy.
Yep.
And so I think that's probably one of the biggest things is like, once you make the decision, no regrets.
Yeah. Yeah. That's so
Um,
good. Yeah.
but yeah, we continue, I would say to this day, like finding the secret roller disco, right? We're like, if we move to Portland, what does home feel like and what do we want it to feel like? And then we seek that out and we fill up our time and our space with that. We made sure we had connections for our kids. You know, we have some good connections for Jason and I. So again, it's really like, what are the goals of the family? And now
Mm.
how do we fit that into our current environment?
Oh, that's just such a wonderful thing for sure. I think one of the things that is coming to mind as you're talking through this is like clearly you're much more comfortable with change, with newness, with embracing something like this that is a leap of faith, that is unknown, just, a conflict avoidant or change avoidant or, something like that to really like help their mindset to be more open, be more adventurous, like you and Jason are.
Yeah. I think it's a good question. And for me, those spaces start with journaling.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And again, it's really about what's important to you, what makes you happy. When you're talking about others that are impacted, like from a family perspective, right? What's important to them? What do you love about your current situation? What could the future situation look like? But also, like, man, if you're even thinking about the change, or maybe it's being given to you, I think that one is a consideration. If you have the place to choose, then maybe it's a little bit easier. Be honest with the things that are scary, though. For
Mm-hmm.
me, writing them down and talking about them are what allows me to get there and not go, oh man, I knew it was going to happen, but we never talked about it. If I can talk about it and it's a real scary thing, I at least feel better because we got it out in the air and I know we can tackle it together. So for
Yeah.
me, one of my things is I have to at least talk about it. I think Jason would do it without talking about any of those things, Laurel, right? So
Yeah.
that's on my list. Like, here's the 5 things that I'm not really sure I like. And you're going to have to sit and have this conversation with me because then I won't talk about it once we get there. I'm not going to
Yeah.
have I told you so moment.
Right. Yeah.
So be honest with yourself, journal, talk about it, get excited about the possibility. And then again, really spend time on the stuff that's exciting, but know
Mm.
that it's not going to be, your current life is probably not perfect either. So you have to be
Yeah.
okay and allow for things to maybe not be perfect. And that's really good. What I would say is, one of my moves, I can remember probably like the first, I think it was when we were on a look and see trip. So we made the decision. We were going, we were look and see. Jason had to leave early. So I was in the hotel by myself and I curled up under the comforter at like 2 PM and like started crying. And I was like, oh my gosh, we're making the
Mm.
biggest mistake ever. I can't do this. And it was all over. Like, I didn't know where the dry cleaner was, and that's okay. And so I
Yeah.
think a big piece of it is allow yourself and your space to be afraid and
Yeah.
to grieve the things you lose. You will
Mm.
lose some things.
Yeah.
And you have to be really honest. I say the hardest part probably is if you're leaving family or some kind of incredible support network, you really do need to have that honest conversation with yourself if that works for you and your family. And or what do you need to do to fill in those blanks when they're not there so you have the support you need.
That's so good. Yep. That is just perfectly said. What have we not talked about? What else would you say to a woman or a mom who's contemplating a move? Or I know you've had friends reach out to you after you having made this move. So what else would you say?
Again, I think it's about being really honest with yourself, but don't be afraid to have an adventure.
Mm.
And I've honestly loved all of my moves. And I would say, like, again, go for it.
Mm.
Go
Mm.
for it, you know? And I think you could probably relate. There's, again, it's not that easy. We have jobs attached to it. We have a lot of things that are attached to it. If for some reason it's not the perfect move and it's not the perfect fit, does that mean you find a different area later down the road? Like, I think it feels so big and definitive because you're
Yeah.
looking for school districts, you're looking for the perfect house. It is a lot of money, it's a lot of effort and energy. But in the end, we have abilities to create change again
Yeah.
later.
That's
So
right.
know that there is flexibility down the road and you can continue to have some control over your future, even if you decide to make a big giant move.
Yeah, that's so good. I think that's you and I have talked about that, and that just knowing that it doesn't have to be permanent. So if it's not working, you're not stuck. That doesn't mean you can't fix it at some point in time in the future, make a different decision. So I really appreciate that very much.
The other thing I would say is, like, remove stress wherever you
Mm.
can. Don't create it. So,
Mhm.
and that's going to look different for different people. For some people, that would mean move into an apartment for 2 years so you can get a flavor and a taste and figure out where you want to settle down and explore. Like, for you, if that removes stress of not having to pick the final spot, then take that approach. For us, we're like an all-in couple, and that would be the most stressful thing ever. So we do as much kind of research as we can online. And as crazy as it sounds, from the time I knew I was going to take this job to the time we were in the house was less than 2 months.
Yeah.
We found the house, via video. We found someone that we really trusted. We did tons of like phone calls and touch points with people, like in a very rapid pace. So for us, it was like intense, but get it over with and then live life.
Yeah.
But we know what our threshold is. So figure out what that looks like for you so you can
Yes.
remove the stressful parts.
Yeah.
Knowing there will be stress, but like minimize it. Make that stress fit best for your stress personality, I guess.
I love that. Yep, that is so true and so good. And whether that means you hire people to help you pack, or you hire people to help you move, or get all your family to come and help you load up, whatever it is. Yeah, they're definitely so good to be able to look at, okay, what are those stress points, and can I do something that will help to alleviate those? So,
Yep.
yay. Yeah, good. Well, thank you so much. This has been so helpful and insightful and encouraging, and so excited for you guys that this leap of faith has been so good for you and your entire family.
It's been absolutely the best move yet.
So good. Well, thank you. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Laurel.
I love the intentionality and the resoluteness that Mary speaks with. It just is so comforting and inspiring to me to be able to hear her confidence because of a process that she used. So I just am so grateful that you've listened in, and hope that you glean some really helpful and informative insights from her as well. One thing that I just really love from what she talked about, and I think is so important for us to think about, is this idea of, even if it's something that you are super excited about, have done your homework on, are making like the best possible decision that you can, and all of the right components are there, that you're still going to grieve, that there still will be an element that will be different, and that you will look back on what you moved away from with an element or two or three of grief, and identifying that, being able to name that, and just be okay with that is such a important part of things. I think for those of you who have kind of followed my personal story, you'll know that I moved within the last 6 or so months, and there have been really beautiful and good things as a result of that move. But there definitely are several things that I really, really, truly miss from where we were previously. And so just allowing myself the space to talk about those, to journal about those, it has been hugely helpful for my growth and just to process through that. So I loved that she brought that into our conversation. And I also really just love her comment about being honest about what's scary and journaling about those or talking about those. Just, gosh, those two things really stood out to me and struck home for me. So thanks so much for joining for today's conversation with Mary. I look forward to being back with you again next week for another story of taking a leap of faith. What an honor to help you to cultivate confidence, courage, and joy in your life and work. Thank you so much for inviting me to journey with you. I look forward to being back with you next week, where we'll hear another story from a woman whom I love and am inspired by and look forward to learning from.